Now it is time for Mark to go on his rant. It's a very ranty show today.
Yeah.
So you wrote Cloud Templar and North America fans, two groups of people I never really expected to have merged together, need to stop.
Yeah, I had to rewrite this title a couple times to tone it down.
Yeah. Please,
basically, if people missed it, on the subreddit, there was a Slingshot article or something, which was about a Cloud Templar stream that he had, where he was kind of just giving his thoughts about MSI and in particular TSM. And if you read, I can't understand Korean, so I can't watch the stream. I have to take what this article is kind of writing as face value.
Right.
But what he was saying was just like almost sounded like a salty NA TSM fan. It did not seem like really intelligent.
What was he saying?
Basically, he was saying the one thing he said that was good was basically TSM doesn't have any clearly defined strengths. They're strong individual players, and they win their region because they have the best players, but they don't have any actual strengths as a team. And that's true. For the most part, I'd say that's how TSM wins. It's just like generally we're better all across the board than the people we're playing against. And aside from that, though, he was just like kind of firing shots randomly, like, "Oh, NA orgs need better direction, and they're really bad about this thing and this other thing, and I just don't get it. And I want to see TSM do well, and I'm sick of seeing NA do bad, and blah blah blah." And like he didn't provide any kind of like useful criticism or feedback or like what we should be doing better. It was kind of just reading like I wish NA was a better region. And
it's like a Reddit thread.
It sounded like a Reddit thread. And then similarly, NA fans were like, TSM and North America needs to stop copying the Korean region. They need to do their own thing and find a style that works for them and this and that. And like, I know Emily thinks that the whole idea of like the Korean style doesn't even like necessarily exist. And just the idea that like NA's losing because of like just team structure and we don't approach the game correctly. And it's like so many other issues at play in North America that is ridiculous that I keep seeing this crop up as these kind of like fanboy grasping at any reason other than like a lot of the ones that are really like underlying and true.
Yeah. More giggles from Kelsey Moser.
What are you giggling about?
Yeah.
No, I just like I enjoy this because I feel like the thing that is one of the most frustrating things for me about just the international League of Legends scene in general is that there is like no effort to actually inform yourselves about what's going on in other regions before you start making like really broad sweeping generalizations.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, coincidentally tying into the initial topic. But it's just like people will make really broad statements like, I think we incorporate Korean players better in NA without like pointing to specific ways in which they are saying that they're incorporating Koreans better. Or like Cloud Templar will criticize NA and say something like, they're just approaching the game poorly. And it's like, how many NA teams has Cloud Templar talked to recently? Like, he's talked to a lot, but the question is, like, how does he have this information? Where is this information coming from? And it's actually not that hard. Like, you would think the language barrier would be a big deal, but you can actually contact, like, Chinese teams, Korean teams, and talk to them a little bit about this stuff, like, fairly easily. So
that's a big point. It's just, like, people who don't really know what they're talking about, kind of just like saying like random things. And then like I want to talk a little bit about just like what I think are a lot of the core issues in North America beyond like, yes, we are not perfect. Our teams, half of them have horrible organizational just strengths. They don't do anything well. But the top teams, even they have to deal with these other underlying issues. And a couple of them are like, one, our player base is tiny. We are the same size as Brazil in terms of our player base, our ranked player base. Europe and Korea are 2.5 times bigger than the NA player base. So think about this. For every Dardoch that exists in North America, there's 2.5 of them in Korea.
Yeah, but we import them.
Yeah, great. Not including China, obviously, because China's player base is ridiculous, but we'll leave China kind of as its own thing. But like, if you're a Korean, in the Korean scene, for every Dardoch, there's 2.5 of them. For every Stixay, there's 2.5 of them. Just think about that. How much better those regions are going to become. Okay,
but I'm gonna challenge that argument. Sure. I get where you're coming from, but if you said you're going to leave China alone, but China's a pretty good counterexample of this, right? Like if China had like their player base is just tremendous, shouldn't they be stomping on Korea?
Well,
because
so here's
more?
This is actually an interesting point because what always happens when you start explaining your thoughts on something is they take one idea at a time. And then they attack that when it's really like a combination of these factors coming together that make it true. And I think we can say that for the most part, China has been the number 2 region in the world. For the most part, right?
Yeah, I guess I
mean, I
really
think
pay attention to that.
Yeah, you don't know what's going on. But so then what separates China from Korea would be the next question, right? And it'd probably be something along the lines of effort and attitude. When you look at Faker, he has 800 solo queue games this season. Do you know how ridiculous that is? People say hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Well, guess what? The best player in the world is playing the most solo queue. Look at NA players like solo queue accounts. Most of them do not have nearly as many games as Korean pros. Korean pros are all between like 500 and 800. I was doing a little bit of research on this. Most NA's pros are not in that spectrum. Some of them are. Like Sneaky is a guy who plays a ton of solo queue. C9, TSM for the most part are pretty good about it. But like across the board, some players like Stixay's main account, and maybe I'm missing a Smurf or something, but it had like 120 games. It is a very just arrogant attitude to think that you can play so much worse than another region with a bigger population base and somehow compete with them when you're not working as hard. And I know I hear the NA pros complaints all the time, and they're very justified. Queue times suck. You have to deal with worse ping. There's just like the dynamic queue and role selection ruin queue times as well as the quality of games, and it sucks to put up with that, and I understand. But like, there's no excuse. Like, you can't just be like, oh yeah, those are bad, and so we're just gonna not play solo queue and be worse.
Well, what if they are trying to play solo queue but they can't get enough access to games because? Then
figure it out. You have to be more creative if you have these issues. You can't just say these are our problems and not try and fix them. So we talk about NA in-houses, right? And then Riot you can't stream them, so then Bjergsen doesn't want to do it or something, and Sneaky doesn't want to do it, and you get all these problems. But like, if that's the problems that our region faces, we need to look and fix those problems specifically, and not say, "Oh man, we got to stop copying Koreans. That's the problem." No. What about attitudes? Why are our attitudes so much worse? We talk about 3 Dardoks in Korea for every one here. Dardok's attitude is one of the worst we've ever seen in the scene in season 6 cropping up.
I mean, that's not...
I actually don't even...
Like, here's the thing with Dardok, though. Like, Dardok's attitude, from my experience with him, maybe you can correct me on this, but, like, is born of a desire to perform at a high level. So, like, if you...
I see you read a Thorn article.
If you have...
Well,
no,
but it is...
No,
it is
I've
true.
actually talked to him.
Yeah,
Breaking point.
It is born from...
Like, and I'm not saying that justifies the behavior, but what I am saying is that if you are a Korean player, like if you are comparing it to Korea, which is what you're doing,
yep,
you would be under an organization where they would either like drop you completely for that attitude, or you would learn to fix it very quickly because of the like coaching structure. And like, people love to throw around the word infrastructure, but it encompasses that kind of thing,
sure.
where if you have a player like that with that kind of attitude, they can be made out to be like a good teammate, but it takes a lot of hard work and it takes coaching and stuff like that. And I think another thing you touched upon is going back to China and why hasn't it worked in China? Yeah. Well, a lot of the times you either have orgs that are ignoring up and coming talent for imports, which is a little, and then you also have just infrastructural problems in terms of coaching, holding players accountable, like
the
stuff
effort
like
thing
that.
Again.
Yeah. So I think that's like you said, it's like a huge issue, huge multifaceted issue.
Right.
The other thing that I just wanted to point out really quickly with the Cloud Templar thing is that you do have to remember, and this is kind of why I was looking at this and I was like, why is this a topic? Because like, although the way you framed it is really good. I was just looking at the title and
blast.
I was like, how is this a topic? And that's because it's someone picking and taking things, and like, this isn't throwing shade at the translator either, but like, they're purposely picking and choosing things from a stream where he's just like kind
stream
of ranting.
Consciousness, yeah.
Yeah. So like, I didn't really like, I saw it on Reddit and I was like, okay.
Yeah,
but it does perpetuate.
Not really a big deal.
Right.
It does, the problem is that, whether taken out of context or whatever the situation is, it continues to perpetuate this kind of idea that some of these false assumptions made about North America.
Well, and I think Kelsey's point is really good too. It's like we have so many people who feel like after an international event, they can comment on like massive structural problems in another region without talking to people in that region, or like addressing how it's a bunch of different things instead of just boiling it down to very like simplified terms.
And I think I don't think he's necessarily wrong either. Like, we don't approach the game correctly. I think you can look at a lot of orgs and say that's probably true. Like, especially in the lower half, once you get out of like maybe TSM C9, like, and maybe CLG, like how many teams are really trying to approach the game correctly in terms of how they structure practice, and are they organized completely? Is their coaching staffs super dedicated and like stuff like that? I think those are real issues, but I think there's a lot of other problems that come first, and they all kind of tie in together.
I think it all ties in together because things like the infrastructural, like having the right kinds of people to help players and things like this are all things that will inform a region's ability or a team's ability to play the game well. And I think that you can see very obvious gaps in understanding of like where we're supposed to be on the map at certain points. How do we control Dragon in relation to Baron and things like this that are huge gaps between SKT and like other teams at the tournament, that I think the reason why SKT has a better grasp of that does go back to things like, okay, do we have the right people who like are paying attention to the right things, and why don't we have that? Is that because we don't have enough people who are playing solo queue well? Is that because we don't have enough collaboration between the teams? Is that because the coaching staff is really, really young still in most regions? Are people not dedicated enough? Like, these are all questions that I think will inform your ability to play the game.
Right.
So I'm just surprised. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to wrap it up unless you want.
I was just going to say I'm surprised this isn't a blame game, because Cloud Temple and
I was going to put it out at some point as another video. Maybe I will again. But the point is basically, if you are in a region with a smaller player base and you don't work as hard as the bigger regions, and you have what I would say, and the Dardock example was just trying to like pick one out of a hat. But like, if you don't have the right attitude, not even just as players, but as orgs, we're like, we have to worry about sponsorship stuff and do all this other crap that maybe some other places don't worry about. It's like, why do you think we're not as good when you look at like all these factors adding up? Do you really think it's because we're copying Koreans too much, or like we don't approach the game the right way? It's like we're probably just, sorry to say it, but worse. We have these other problems.
So sad. All right, let's move on.